My Stirling single, the final episode. I recently sold this engine and it has been shipped to Australia by a professional shipping company. These stills were taken on the day it was boxed up for transit. I was asked by the buyer of the engine to take some photographs to show that it was in good condition before it was shipped, and here it is. The sellotape is holding the safety valve cover in place. 2 layers of sellotape should be fine to stop it moving. It's firmly fastened to the handrails. I didn't want to pack it separately just in case it got lost. This 5-inch gauge Stirling single is an excellent model. The workmanship standard is second to none. I made a series about it called My Stirling Single. When I first bought this engine it was completely unpainted, although it had been run. I replaced the fire grate because that was past its best. The splashers or front mudguards are not fitted. Instead, I put them in a separate plastic box with some bubble wrap. And when I turn over the plastic box, you can see the expired boiler certificate. I'm sad to see this go, but to be honest, I'm having a sale of my personal collection. I'm not getting any younger, and my worst case scenario is to suddenly die and leave my family to figure out what was what. I've tried saying we should make an inventory, but nobody seems to be interested in that. So I'm going to dispose of my collection. And when I finally go to meet my maker, there will be just simple things left. I'm not being morbid about this, I'm being realistic. My prostate cancer is apparently fixed, but I do have some other problems which are also related to the diabetes. This is the front of the tender, and the flexible piping that you can see is silicone rubber. It will need cutting to length to fit onto the locomotive, so I've left it slightly on the long side. And so it doesn't lash about during transit or get caught on anything, I've tucked the pipes in underneath the front of the tender. I'll leave it for the new owner to figure out which one goes where. It's quite easy if you look underneath the tender. 2 of the pipes are the water feeds to the injector. The middle copper pipe with the union nut is the outlet from the tender hand pump. At the right-hand side, one of the pipes feeds the hand pump and the other is the water bypass valve back to the tank. The workmanship on this engine is at a very high level. Here I'm demonstrating that nothing is broken and everything is solid as it should be. The doorbell rang and 2 men arrived from a company called Britannia Apple Yards. And here they are taking a look at what needs to be shipped as I explain what it is and how they need to be very careful with it. I did video the packing process in its entirety. I will edit this video and send the link to the buyer in Australia. It's an insurance thing really. It was just to show the condition of the engine and tender before these 2 professionally packed boxes are sent to Australia. There is a full series on my channel called My Stirling Single, well worth a watch. The rest of this video will feature some extracts from that series. I say goodbye to my Stirling Single. Here are the flashbacks. With the running board removed, it's very easy now to lubricate all the parts in between the frames, and I'm using the extension that I put on my Rylang oil can to do this. This is a really good idea, a piece of 8 pipe on the end of your oil can, but don't forget to put a piece of silicone rubber on the end so you can see it and don't poke your eye out. It's time to give the engine a bit of a run. It's very powerful. I'm holding some Scotch-Brite against the tread of the wheel and it's not stopping, and there's really not much pressure going in here. Even at this speed the engine will be going down the track at quite a good rate. Before I run the engine for an extended period I need to make sure that the lubricator is working. This lubricator is a miniature oil pump. It's really a miniature oscillating cylinder and is driven via a rocking lever, which in turn is driven by one of the valve rods connected to an eccentric on the main crank axle. So there's no problem with the lubricator, it's lubricating the cylinders perfectly. In this clip you can see the rocking arm that drives the lubricator, and that's right next to the water pump. This is an axle driven pump, not a crosshead pump like on the 14XX, and very shortly I'll be testing to see whether this works. But first I need to spin up the engine to a really high speed and make sure nothing falls off it. The time has come when I need to prepare this engine for painting. On this type of engine there's a kind of fairing that goes around the smoke box and around the cylinders, and this is held in place by some brass screws. Somehow I need to lose these because it just wouldn't look good if you could see the brass screws under the paint. I intend to paint the smoke box using some high temperature paint. The last thing that I need are lots of coats of filler primer, which would just blister when I ran the engine in steam. The last job I did on this engine, and that was quite a while ago, was to apply some JB Weld wherever I could see a visible bolt. And here, using a flapper wheel in my Proxxon motor tool, I'm grinding the JB Weld away so it's flush with the fairing. As an experiment, I just put a blob of JB Weld over each bolt, and this is obviously not going to be a good thing to do. After grinding away the JB Weld with the flapper wheel and using some wet to dry sandpaper, I can still feel undulations in the fairing. And as you can see, it's running very well, but this chimney is driving me mad. Here's an original casting for the chimney, which is sat on the general arrangement drawing for the shape of the chimney. This is part of a photograph of a Stirling single, and this is how I want my chimney to look. I really don't want the chimney to look like this because it looks like a toy train. The full size is much better. So I'm going to reprofile the chimney, starting off with making a mandrel. The chimney is in position on the mandrel. I don't need to support the outer end because I'm not going to put much pressure on it, but I do need to put a correct lathe tool into the tool post. This is a brand new round nose tool. If you're doing a job like this, a word of warning, be careful where you commence the cut, because don't forget the bottom of these chimneys are very irregular to fit the smoke box. And if you take the cut too close to the bottom of the chimney, the job will be ruined immediately. This chimney is made from gunmetal, which is a very soft metal, so it's a good idea to start off with a very sharp lathe tool to cut it. That's why I put a new one in the tool post. I printed out the photograph that I use for my desktop wallpaper on the studio computer, and it's currently behind the lathe, and I'm keeping one eye on that and one eye on what I'm doing. This part of the job is much more of an art than a science. In this part of the clip I'm using a half round file, because the bottom part of this chimney is a very specific shape. All I've been doing with the lathe tool is machining away the ridge, but there's still a bit of it showing, as you can see clearly here. Jobs like this can be a bit nerve-wracking. If I cut too far down the chimney, I will damage the bottom part, and that will be very difficult to get right again. If I take too much metal away, then it's not going to look right either, although I could repair this. I would have to use some silver solder and the corresponding flux and build up the metal and then remachine it, but I'm trying not to do that. Here's a quick tip, or it should be really another word of warning. If you do a job like this and remove too much metal, do not use soft solder. It will be fine, it will fill the metal until you steam the engine, and the soft solder will melt and run down the chimney. Because this is a coal-fired steam engine and rather a lot of heat goes up this chimney, more than enough to melt soft solder. And once I fitted the chimney back to the engine, as you can see, it's really nice. What a sexy shape that is. In the past I've had worse looking girlfriends than this chimney. This one is beautiful, just like the one on the photograph. So beautiful, in fact, I will fondle it some more. It's slim, it's slender, and it feels really good. No lumps or bumps in the wrong place. I think the builder of this engine got a bit confused between a Patrick Stirling single and a Midland spinner, which is also a single wheeler. The Stirling single is a Great Northern Railway engine, and the colours were very different to the ones used on the Midland Railway. The quality of finish of the paint on these frames isn't too bad really, so what I'm doing here is using some cellulose thinners or lacquer thinner to degrease and clean up the surface. When doing a job like this, you have to be very careful. Lacquer thinner dissolves normal paint, and if I put too much on, it will dissolve the paint and it will become a mess. I've only applied the lacquer thinner to the cloth so that the cloth is damp, and as you can see, it's removing the grime and the oil, but it's leaving the paint intact. The smoke box has been painted using HMG satin black, and the boiler barrel has been painted using Phoenix Precision Paints Great Northern Railway Loco Green, which is a gloss paint. I left the paint for a couple of days, and now it's time to rub it down. The first grade of sandpaper I'm using is wet to dry sandpaper, and it's 600 grit. As you can see, I'm using it wet, and I change the water frequently. The water is in one of my usual plastic tubs on the bench. Connected to the gas burner is a tin of butane-propane mix, but there's not much left in it. But I don't want to create a raging inferno in the firebox. In this clip I'm holding the can in my hands because the heat of my hands helps the evaporation, although I don't need to do this really because I don't want a lot of heat. This is a massive warning. Do not under any circumstances touch the paint during this process. I'm touching the paint at the moment, but the boiler is not even warm. When the satin black paint on the smoke box and the green paint on the boiler barrel get hot, initially the paint will become very soft, and if you touch it, you will mark it. You must not touch any of the paint when it's hot. While the boiler is raising steam, I think it's a good idea to fit the smoke box door. First though, I'm going to have a look at the water gauge. I didn't fill the boiler this full. The water expands as it gets warm, and it's nearly at the top of the glass. At this point I fitted the safety valve. I wanted to clear all of the condensate from the cylinders, or at least most of it, so I opened the regulator wide. At this stage the pressure gauge hasn't even moved, and as you can see the water's boiling merrily inside the boiler, and there's not much steam at all yet. What I'm doing is rotating the wheel by hand, and as the piston moves back and forth it allows steam to be admitted and exhausted from the cylinder, but most of it's running away through the drain valves. The smoke box design on the Stirling single is very different. It's a wrapper that goes around the smoke box and the cylinders. So by initially letting some steam into the cylinders, just like the boiler wrapper, the black paint on the smoke box is warming up, but slowly. The engine is now running under its own steam, and I need to keep the speed low. In this part of the clip I'm not just waving to you. What I'm saying is do not touch the paint under any circumstances. If you touch the paint, you will mark it. If any bubbles do appear, don't do anything about that, just leave them. I've just noticed that the oil pump is not pumping any oil, so here I'm going to remove the cap and have a look what's going on. Oh, I can see what it is. The little pump isn't going round, the ratchet wheel's stuck. This is probably because the engine's been on a shelf for quite a long time. Luckily, an application of lubricating oil fixed the problem. As I'm painting by a wide open door, I thought it would be a good idea to take it into the inner part of the workshop for the paint to dry, and this will prevent any flies from landing on the paint and sticking to it. I'm a bit behind schedule on some jobs because painting and varnishing has been difficult lately owing to the weather. But today, which is the 6th of April 2022, the weather outside is beautiful. Spring has definitely sprung. As far as seasons go, I really like spring, when a young man's fancy turns to thoughts of shaking a rattle can and painting wheels. Sadly though, I am no longer a young man. I don't particularly feel all that old, although when I look in the mirror I get a bit of a shock. Let the painting frenzy commence. The paint I'm using is Great Northern Green by Phoenix Precision Paints, and I do find this to be very strange paint when you spray it. What I have found when I brush this paint is you brush it on and it looks horrible, then you leave it to dry, and when you look at it later, once it has dried, it's all very smooth, it sort of flattens out. In exactly the same way as I did with the etching primer, I have to paint these wheels one at a time, and I can only paint one side at a time. You will notice that I thoroughly clean the top of the jig before moving on to a second wheel set. After I painted the wheel sets, I took each of them into the workshop, and I've actually sat them on top of an aerosol cap. This is a bit risky because they're very easily knocked over, so the answer really is not to knock them over. This is the second coat of paint on the tender buffer beam, and as you can see it's a lot better, but it's still a bit patchy. I masked off the brass part, and it's a good job because on the masking tape there's some evidence of paint. This clip though is really an excuse to show the excellent riveting on this tender. The riveting is truly wonderful. Here's a shot of the other side of the buffer beam, and as you can see I do have a drip from one of the bolts on the top right hand corner. Once the paint has thoroughly hardened, I will rub this area down, but not yet. The paint is still soft, and I'm actually scraping off a drip with my screwdriver near to where the tow hook fits. However, for the part of the tender that pulls the passengers, I think it needs something stronger than just a tow hook. Once again, here's the paint I've been using, Phoenix Precision Paints Buffer Beam Red. This is great paint to use. You paint it on the part, and as it dries it spreads out, and eventually you get a really good finish. This is only coat number 2, as I've just mentioned. I will be giving it a 3rd coat. I could have sprayed this buffer beam, but I do prefer the brush finish. But I will be spraying the cab. Before I do that though, I need to blank off these areas. They're a bit like lens fittings on a camera. Both of them are threaded to take some securing rings for the glass, or in the case of this engine, I think it's some sort of plastic material. These threaded parts are made as separate units and soft soldered onto the front of the cab. I need to mask these off so that the paint doesn't get on the threads, and the simplest way to do this is just to cut cardboard discs and then just press them into the holes to cover the threads. Here's one of the discs. I made 2 of them, and here they are pressed into the windows. Brass is a very difficult metal to successfully paint. You must always key the metal as good as you can. Here I'm using some emery cloth to scratch the entire surface of the cab inside and out and along the edges. This took a while, but it will be worth it. Here I am now in the outer part of the workshop, and I've been vigorously shaking this rattle can to mix up the paint inside for about 3 minutes. I've placed the cab upside down on a plastic tub. I need to be careful I don't get any runs or sags on this part because it will be very noticeable. But I do need to apply slightly more paint than normal. I'll stop the video and you'll see why. At each side of the cab a piece has been soldered in because originally this cab was made in the style of a later Stirling single cab. 2 pieces were cut out and very expertly soldered in position. I need to make sure that the joint between the 2 pieces of metal and the solder is invisible, and in order to do this, that's why I'm spraying slightly more paint. You shouldn't really do this with etching primer, but this acrylic stuff seems to like being built up, and once it's been rubbed down it really does give an excellent finish. I wait until the paint tacks off slightly before rotating the part. Then I start to apply the 2nd coat from exactly the same place on the cab where I started the job. My painting skills are not very good really, and I don't know why I usually get quite a good result. My general rule is, if it feels right, then it is right. If you would like to watch the complete series, it is called My Stirling Single, and once again here it is on the bench, in very good condition before it was packed into the boxes for shipping. And that concludes this final episode. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.